really excited to get a chance to talk to you about some of the stuff that we're working on with training and VR. My name is Jennifer Holland. I'm a senior program manager at Google, and I'm joined by my colleague, Britt Minuti, who is a product manager at Google. Before we get started, can we see a show of hands? How many of you at your companies are currently using either augmented reality or virtual reality? Okay. And how many of you are using augmented reality or virtual reality for training? Handful. Okay. And how many of you are just trying to figure out what augmented reality and virtual reality is and how it might be used? Okay. The good news is we have something for everyone. And so today we're going to spend a little bit of time walking you through the current training landscape. And I think a lot of what you will see is pretty familiar, and you can, it will resonate with you. Talk a little bit about some of the efficacy and research that's being done to show how VR can be a powerful tool for training specifically. We'll talk you through some of the things that we have been working on at Google within VR. And then give you a couple of examples of companies that are currently using virtual reality today and how they have incorporated that into their workflows. That will hopefully provide you with some inspiration to get started. So before we dive headfirst into everything, I think we want to kind of review today's landscape with training, and I think this is probably all too familiar with how you currently train employees today. We know that many of you are, active G Suite users and use the whole productivity suite to increase collaboration, making things and your workflow seamless with your employees, and it hopefully drives efficiency, saves your company a lot of time and money. We spent a lot of time talking about how these tools can transform the workplace. What we haven't talked a lot about is how virtual reality fits into that and how those tools with virtual reality create a really compelling training experience. And that's what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today. For the past year, we have been traveling the globe, talking to as many companies as we could, and to just really understand how companies are using virtual reality and what are some of the hindrances that they're running into to really scale their initiatives. And one of the things that we've heard is that it's really hard to create content, and it's really hard to create, a lot of folks are starting with training in particular, and it's really hard to get going, that they don't necessarily have the resources to scale. And as you likely know, sort of current training regimes often look like a presentation, some handouts. You hope that your employees are paying attention. There's usually some modules involved. There's some reading. There's a lot of antiquated techniques for memorization, and that takes folks out of their day-to-day where the work is actually happening, and you're in this sort of sterile conference room to learn. We also know that companies are spending a lot of time and money to train employees, and because of these techniques, and retention is fairly low, companies are having to spend quite a bit of money per employee each year, every 6 months to a year, retraining and teaching their employees. And one of the things that we found in our research is that on average, companies are spending about $1,000 per company or per employee just on training. And we know that's a lot of money. So one way to understand these types of how traditional training can be ineffective is with a theory that a lot of cognitive scientists use. Is anyone familiar with this? Has anyone seen this? Raise your hand. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Great. So this is called the cognitive load theory. And it says that you can think about our capability to learn like a funnel, like what you see right here. And basically it states that the total mental energy that you have to learn something is what's left over after you've subtracted the inherent difficulty of the thing that you're trying to understand, plus the effort required just to understand how that concept is presented. And what you're left with is then the mental energy to actually learn. And while we can't do much about how how difficult certain concepts are, we know that the world's very complicated. There's not a whole lot that we can do about that. But we can do something with the bottom part of that funnel, and that's where virtual reality can really play a role. And let's just take an example of training to become a firefighter. This is the kind of job where the only way to truly prepare is to be thrown into the fire, so to speak. You need to be on the job responding. You need to be in a real world simulation and to be, functionally prepared for the real deal. The National Training Laboratory conducted a study where they found that for high-stress jobs like firefighting, lecture-style learning was 5% retention, and reading-led training led to 10% retention. But using virtual reality led to a 75% retention of training material. And it's not really a surprise that firefighters are better equipped when they're able to go through a simulation and being immersed in an experience. Because we often say things like, you learn by doing. You learn by engaging your body and your mind. Embodied cognition is the theory behind it. And so because you're able to recognize things spatially, you're able to retain the information a lot better. So let's take a moment to understand what immersive computing is and how virtual reality plays a part within that and why it's valuable to your company. So for those of you that raise your hand that aren't necessarily as familiar with virtual reality and augmented reality, they are part of a broader area of technology that we call immersive computing. This area has a multitude of experiences that exist on a spectrum. So starting with augmented reality, AR, which allows you to bring anything to you. So in this example you see on the slide, it's Da Vinci's original helicopter that could plop down right on your desk. Or virtual reality, which takes you anywhere. So that you could be visiting the Taj Mahal, or you could imagine using virtual reality to go out onto a field site for construction. There are broad applications for it. And at Google, we believe that VR plus AR is the next computing platform, and that it will be just as powerful, disruptive, and valuable as the other platforms that have preceded it. And we really think that this shift will be as powerful as the smartphone revolution was a decade ago, and before that, the introduction of personal computers and graphic chips. And the important thing to remember about what makes immersive computing so compelling is that it adds vastly richer input and output for solving real human needs. So when computing was first born, it was revolutionary to be able to type a command into a command line and have that computer be responsive. So imagine you could perhaps be writing a program that allows a player in a game to throw a ball. You would typically, go in and type that command in. But imagine if you could actually be in the game and actually throw the ball and have the computer react. Immersive computing actually allows you to be part of it and to be part of that experience. And it's more aligned to how we operate as humans. And now you might be wondering, how does this relate to training? Well, if you think about training as a representation of how we will act day to day, having this richer kind of input and output likely means that our chances of being effectively trained are much higher. And we know very much that training isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, but imagine if you could use the best of G Suite tools combined with virtual reality to build these immersive training experiences. Our vision is that virtual reality is part of the ecosystem of tools that you use, and they very much complement one another. They all have a role. We see a lot of the companies, which we'll get into later in the presentation, who are building training not only just with virtual reality, but they're using Google Meet, for example, to bring remote offices together to conduct trainings. They're then building their content in virtual reality using Tour Creator, which we'll talk about. They're then going in and they're using Jamboard for different interactive experiences within the classroom setting. And then they're following up to assess knowledge on a continuum basis with Google Forms. So you can see how the tools work together and work with existing tools that you have within your workflow. So you now might be thinking, great, okay, VR, I want to use it, I want to deploy it within my company. And you probably think, hell, it's really expensive and it's going to require a lot of engineers. But we're actually happy to share that it doesn't require a lot of engineers or time and money. We built a tool called Tour Creator, which I'm now going to have Britt talk about and walk you through some of the examples of how companies are using it.
Thanks so much, Jen. So as Jen just mentioned, thanks to the launch of Tour Creator, anyone within your company today can create a virtual reality training tour. Tour Creator is a web application that launched just a few months ago at Google I/O, and it gives anyone the power to create virtual content regardless of their technical experience. Thanks to this launch, now HR managers, business owners, employees, anyone in your organization has the power to make lightly interactive VR content that can be shared via the web. And when you go to Tour Creator, you can either start by creating a new tour, or you can access a draft that you've been working on. And you start out by adding some basic metadata, things like a title, a description, cover photo. And then you fill your tour with scenes. Scenes are made possible through the use of 360 photos, and if you have your own 360 photos, you can upload them in just a couple of clicks, but if you don't, have no fear, we've directly integrated with Street View, so you can take advantage of the massive corpus of 360-degree photos already available in Google Maps. So if you think about this, this could be particularly interesting if you're trying to create a tour for onboarding and you want to show potential new employees where your office is located, or perhaps there's a new work site that your employees are going to and you want to give them a tour of that before they venture out. Now, after you fill your tour with scenes, you add what we call points of interest. Points of interest allow you to highlight key areas of importance throughout the scene. And you can add a little bit of text information for your employees to read as they go through the tour. You can also enrich the tour with things like 2D image overlays and ambient audio. Ambient audio makes your employees feel like they're actually there. They're actually hearing the sounds of the workplace as they experience the tour. And you can even add narration, either at the scene level or to each of your points of interest, that can help guide your employees through each step of the way. Now, once you're done creating the tour, the last step is to publish it, and you can either make it public or just use that link internally within your company. So as an example, let's say your recruiting department is making a tour to help recruit new employees. In that case, you might want to make it public and embed it on your public-facing website. But in the case of making internal training materials, you would just want to share that and maybe embed it in an internal site just for your employees. And when you publish your tour, you're actually publishing it to Poly, Google's online library of 3D content. If you're not familiar with Poly, it launched late last year as a way for anyone to upload and access 3D assets that can be used for AR and VR. And as of the launch of Tour Creator, Poly is now the home for 3D experiences in the form of tours. And this is where the true beauty of this product comes in. Because you're publishing your tour to the web, all it takes to view it is a simple URL. This means that you can send an email out to your employees with a link to the tour. They can view it right on their desktop computer, or they can pull it up on their mobile device and use Magic Window to have a more immersive experience, or they can tap a button to take that same mobile device, put it in a Google Cardboard headset, and immediately be immersed in the VR tour that your company just created. Now you might be thinking, what is this magic? I thought when it came to VR, you had to have custom applications and really expensive headsets. Well, that's not the case. Viewing of these tours on the web is actually made possible through technology called WebXR. And WebXR allows you to view immersive content simply using the web. And we intentionally built Tour Creator in this way to make it as accessible as possible without requiring all these app installs and expensive hardware. And aside from the fact there's lots of ways to view the content thanks to the web also gives you the ability to embed these tours. So when you go to Poly, you'll see a simple share button. Click on that, and you get a little embed snippet that you can use to embed a tour on your public-facing website or perhaps in an internal training module. And you can imagine how embeds can be transformational for business outside of just the training and employee development area. Now, how many of you have a real estate business or are involved in real estate in any way? Okay. Not too many. Well, imagine that you had a real estate business, and instead of arming your agents with just 2D photos that they could upload to their listings, instead, they could embed an actual 360 virtual reality tour of the properties that they were trying to sell. And in fact, before we launched Tour Creator, we partnered closely with REA Group. They are the #1 place for real estate in Australia. And they built an integration so that their agents can actually embed tours made with Tour Creator directly in their listings so buyers can see those tours either on their website or through the mobile app. And the best part about all of this is that Tour Creator is actually completely free to use and accessible to anybody with an internet connection. This means that your HR teams, your training teams, anybody in your company can create a VR training tour today in less than 30 minutes without any prior experience or technical expertise. Now, you may be wondering, this all sounds great, but our company is actually using this thing. So we wanted to point out a few examples. Before launching Tour Creator, we partnered closely with KLM Airlines. Now, KLM uses virtual reality for training in a variety of different ways, one of which is through Tour Creator. What you see here is a tour that they made of one of their aircrafts in order to train their flight crew on how to get around and use that particular aircraft. They've also recently expanded into using Tour Creator for training their food staff. So where does all the food items go in the airplane? Where can I find the coffee, etc. And as Chris from KLM has pointed out, using VR as a training mechanism for their company is saving them tons of money because in their particular case, they don't actually have to fly the aircraft and the crew to all be in the same location for this training to occur. In fact, their crew members can do this training from wherever they're located. And this means that they can become acquainted with the aircraft before they even step foot inside. Another great example is Honeygrow. Honeygrow is a fast casual restaurant chain, and they make things like bowls and salads. And they're very passionate about the ingredients and where they source them from and want to make sure that their employees understand that backstory when they're serving their customers. So what you see here is a tour that they made of the entire assembly line for their food to sort of highlight to their employees the backstory of each of these ingredients so that they can communicate this well when serving their customers. And when we think of the applications of this technology, they don't only need to apply to the training portion of employee development. A recent study from the US Labor Department suggests that 65% of today's school children will be employed in jobs that do not even exist today. This means it's going to be on employers, all of your companies, to be able to show these future employees what it's like to fulfill these jobs. And as Walt Disney once said, if you can dream it, you can do it. Tour Creator and other virtual reality tools allow people to actually dream the dream before they execute on it, right? They can actually feel like they're there doing the job before they commit to that career. And what you see here is a great example of this in action. So this is a tour of a day in the life of Victoria Neji, who's a human-robot interaction designer, PhD student at Duke University. This tour allows others who might relate to Victoria to actually view this as a potential career for themselves and feel like it's accessible, where previously they might have thought it was completely inaccessible to them. And we're seeing broad applications of this technology across other areas of business as well besides training. So Moynihan Group, which is a big real estate developer in New York City, has been using Tour Creator to make tours of all of their new properties. And Time Out New York has been creating tours of having the best day ever in New York City. They've created tours of everything from Central Park to Lincoln Center to the New York Public Library. Now, it's one thing to hear about this from us. It's another to hear it direct from the source. So we're going to cut to a brief video that showcases some of these examples in action.
Time Out has always been about helping people explore their city, and Tour Creator helps us do just that. It's really gonna help us be able to innovate more in the digital world and really create new content. We get some cool 360 photos, and we just pop them right into Tour Creator. We pull images, information, fun facts, things to do in that area, anything you could really possibly need to know. We have some really cool tours through that.
We can use Tour Creator virtually see the aircraft. Which means that we can train the people whenever they want and wherever they want with virtual reality. And that saves quite a lot of money.
Spectrum Designs is a full-service customer apparel business with a mission to provide purposeful working opportunities and authentic vocational experiences to individuals with autism.
Tour Creator has allowed us to habituate our staff and our employees before they even come in the building. Before they take one step over the threshold into our building, Tour Creator lets us show them exactly what to expect, become acclimated to the building, to the noise, to the machinery.
The Tour Creator tool brings everything to life. Clients feel so comfortable knowing what the spaces are going to look like by seeing it through this Tour Creator tool. It's indispensable.
And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Jen for a brief recap before we jump into Q&A.
Thanks, Brett. So to sort of bring it all together, we know that current training methods are costly, not as effective as they could be, and that by using virtual reality, you can help increase the retention rate of the information that you're presenting to your employees. Specifically, we know that Tour Creator, and just working alongside hundreds of companies using it, we have seen firsthand how transformational a simple tool can be and how easy it is to get going. You really don't need all of this expensive hardware to really just start using virtual reality. And hopefully some of the examples that we showed you were just inspirational enough for you to get started, but also give you a frame of reference for how companies are currently using the technology today. So with that, I mean, we're just at the beginning, and one of the things that we need is all of your help. And we are just, again, at the beginning, and so what we'd like to do is work with all of you. Yes, you should absolutely take pictures of the slide. We want to work with all of you to get started. So the first link that you see is how to create a tour. So that's the actual product. You can go and see some of the tours that we mentioned on that second link. And then the last two links that you see here, one is to pilot with us. So that means you get access to new features, new functionality, new tools that we build before anyone else does. And get to provide your feedback on what you like and what you don't like and what you want us to change. We take feedback really seriously and co-design and work alongside companies. That's just how we operate as a team. So definitely encourage you to work with us on that. And then the last link is if you maybe don't have the bandwidth to do a full-blown pilot with your company, we're always looking for participants to participate in UX studies, to point things out, let us give your feedback on early designs. Those URLs are all case sensitive, so just make sure when you're typing that in that you obey the cases.